Could the US presidential election be delayed? Donald Trump is criticized for suggesting postponing the vote in November. But could mail-in ballots and the coronavirus pandemic sway the result? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Imran Khan. The US presidential election is planned to happen just over 3 months from now. With the number of coronavirus infections still rising in the world's worst affected country, many states are making postal voting easier so Americans won't need to queue at polling stations. But Donald Trump says the mail-in ballots will lead to fraud without providing any evidence. The president's tweeted about wanting to delay the election, but even his Republican supporters are joining Democrats to condemn the idea. Kimberly Halkett has more from the White House.
Even by his own standards, his tweet was nothing short of astonishing. On Thursday, U.S. President Donald Trump suggested the November presidential election should be postponed. Alleging potential fraud associated with mail-in voting, Trump tweeted, "Delay the election until people can properly, securely, and safely vote." The president has no legal authority to change the election date, leading even members of Trump's own Republican Party in Congress to scoff at the prospect.
Well, never in the history of the country, through wars, depressions, and the Civil War, have we ever not had a federally scheduled election on time, and we'll find a way to do that again this November 3rd.
No way should we ever not hold our election.
Trump claims that voters' identity can't be verified and that a voter might cast more than one ballot.
I don't want to delay. I want to have the election. But I also don't want to have to wait for 3 months and then find out that the ballots are all missing and the election doesn't mean anything. That's what's going to happen, Steve. That's common sense. So we're asking for a lot of trouble. And no, do I want to see a date change? No. But I don't want to see a crooked election.
But President Trump may have had another motive for his incendiary tweet, upending negative news headlines. It's been another week of gloomy economic numbers for a president hoping to cruise to re-election on a strong economy, now obliterated by business shutdowns caused by COVID-19. Poll numbers are also not in Trump's favor. Most show him trailing the presumptive Democratic presidential nominee, Joe Biden, by double digits. On Thursday, while Biden didn't address Trump's push to delay the election, he did blame Trump for the historic job losses that have left more than 20 million Americans without work.
Because Trump so badly mishandled the COVID virus and caused this spiral that's occurred, there is no money to be able to keep necessary people employed.
It's not the first time Trump has expressed reservations about the upcoming presidential election. Earlier this month, he said he may not accept the results of the November poll.
Can you give a direct answer? You will accept the election?
I have to see. Look, I have to see. No, I'm not going to just say yes. I'm not going to say no. And I didn't last time either.
With less than 95 days until Election Day, the president's suggestions are causing consternation for an already uneasy electorate looking to uphold the American tradition of a peaceful transfer of power. Kimberly Halkett, Al Jazeera, the White House.
Let's introduce our panel. In Washington, D.C., Adam Goodman, a Republican Party strategist. Here in Doha, Clyde Wilcox, professor of government at Georgetown University. And also in Washington, Simon Rosenberg, president of the New Democrat Network think tank. Welcome to you all. Let's begin in Washington, D.C. with Adam Goodman. Let's make it absolutely clear first that the president can't actually delay this election unilaterally. He does need Congress. He's unlikely to get Congress because it's controlled by the Democrats. However, it does beg the question, what is the president's strategy here? Why does he keep bringing up this idea that he might not leave office if the result doesn't go his way? He's thinking about delays. What is the strategy here? It all seems very confusing.
Well, it starts with the idea that upwards of 4 out of 10 Americans already distrust that the final election result in any election is accurate. But the president, I think, is not using the right word. He keeps focusing on the word fraud, which is, I think, a tough thing to prove with mail-in balloting, which is going to be at absolutely record levels this time, it's really the word incompetence. For the first time in American history, we're going to have an avalanche of mail-in ballots in many states that are not used to anything more than 10, 20, 25% coming that way, that are going to have to be handled expertly the first time out, often with new systems that they've never used before, and depending on something that they don't control, the United States Postal Service. So I think the more likely outcome in a close election is going to be a lot of contention built around the fact that we are for the first time having to handle this massive mailing in terms of balloting, as opposed to the more traditional method of showing up at the polls, which obviously has been impacted by the pandemic.
I mean, Adam, you do say that the president doesn't control the postal service. Yeah, that's absolutely accurate. But the head of the postal services is Louis DeJoy, one of his key supporters and somebody that actually has had the time to be able to get this right. This falls into the president's ballpark, right? This is his fault.
Well, yes and no. You're absolutely right that this person who heads the United States Postal Service is a Trump appointee, but I don't think anyone's going to blame the head of the U.S. Postal Service if they're having to deal with, again, a mass amount, an unprecedented amount of mail-in ballots at a time of a pandemic where their own labor resources are stretched then. And again, my point here is that no one with a new system right out of the box gets everything right. And I really worry most for this country in terms of what would happen in a close election. I was there with Katherine Harris back in the 2000 recount in Florida. The one thing we couldn't control, the one thing that just never quite added up for a lot of Americans, was the fact that in Florida that year, it was darn close. And our election systems in America aren't yet good enough, frankly, to be able to give people confidence, complete confidence, in a close result, that is the actual and final result.
Simon Rosenberg, Biden is leading in the polls by a significant amount. The economy seems to be tanking in the US. The president's looking for a distraction, right?
Well, I think let's hope it's only a distraction. I mean, I think that the concern in the US is that the president, in his moment of desperation, would take steps that would be anti-democratic, that would prevent there from being a free and fair election and a legitimate transfer of power. I mean, I think that he's got an authoritarian impulse in him. And I think that, the issue of the post office is a very good example. The post office isn't being stretched. The post office actually has very little volume right now. There's very little mail happening in America because of the economic downturn. But the Republicans have refused to fund the post office this year in order to weaken it, to make it harder for us to actually conduct the election. This is a purposeful strategy coming from the White House. And it looks as if the president is actively trying to undermine both the idea of the legitimacy of the election and the ability for us to carry out an election at a time of crisis. This mail balloting is not a new thing in America. It's been around for a very long time. The president actually talks about the import of absentee ballots, which he uses and which virtually his entire senior staff use when they vote. It's just that the president hasn't prepared the country for the kind of election that we need to conduct this time because of COVID. And the idea that it's a smart thing to gather everybody to vote in person when there's a legitimate alternative it's ridiculous. And so I think the greater concern, just to summarize, is that the president seems to be toying with things that would allow him to prevent us from having a free and fair election and a legitimate transfer of power if he were to lose the election in the fall.
Clyde Wilcox, I am going to come to you in just a second, but Adam Goodman is shaking his head there in Washington, D.C. at Simon Rosenberg's comments. Why the disagreement?
I respect Simon greatly, and some of the points he's making are valid. The one that isn't is the United States Postal Service. It's been a mess for a long time. And I've talked to a lot of election supervisors around the country because I'm very interested in how prepared or not prepared they are for this election. And I can tell you, almost universally, they're worried that they're not going to get it right. When I say get it right, they're not going to be able to handle something they've never had to face before. And already in the primary season, this campaign season, we've seen examples of tens of thousands of uncounted ballots or ballots that came in supposedly too late to be counted in primaries. So what is there to lead us to believe that's going to be any different when the volume of votes coming in by mail are going to be at a clip 2 or 3 times greater than what we've seen in the primaries?
Can I just respond to that quickly?
Go.
95% of the elections that have been conducted this year have been conducted without any problems. In COVID, in this environment, this is just the reason that we're struggling is because Donald Trump is trying to prevent us from having a free and fair election, because he knows if there is a free and fair election, he's going to lose badly. And I think the problem that we face in America now is that the worse the president's poll numbers get, and they continue to get worse, and it looks like this could be a wave and landslide election for the Democrats, the more incentive he has to cheat or to interfere, like he did, frankly, in the 2016 election with his work with the Russian government and the intervention of the FBI. We already have a history of there being outside extraordinary interference in our elections. And I think that the president could have taken this whole series of steps to have made this far easier. And in fact, he's done the exact opposite. So our hope is that, we are going to continue to work in this next stimulus round or this economic package to get the post office fully funded, to give it the resources it needs to conduct the election properly. And I think the big tell will be is that the Republicans continue to deny the post office the money it needs to do its business. That's I think the great test for the president. If he really wants a free and fair election, fund the post office the way it's supposed to be funded. If he doesn't, it's clear that he's trying to interfere and prevent us from having the kind of election that we need.
Clyde Wilcox in Doha. This is a very extraordinary election in many different ways. It's not just about the post office. There is this allegation, as our guest Simon Rosenberg brought up, of Russian interference within the election itself. This is a very challenging election on a number of reasons. Adam Goodman actually said that, Americans simply don't trust the election results anymore as a result of all of this. Is this perhaps the most difficult election in recent history?
Oh, yes, absolutely. But I want to emphasize that one of the reasons that people don't trust the election outcomes, and it's disproportionately Republicans, is because Donald Trump keeps saying these things, like massive fraud, like the Chinese will be mailing in ballots. This is a time when, as a country, we could do this. It's July. So, yes, the post office is, has problems, but we could fund it, we could get it ready. Yes, many localities are not used to it, but we have 4 months to help them get ready to handle this, right? So if we believe in a free and fair election, there's plenty of time. But the president really needs to stop undermining the legitimacy. I think many people, including many Republicans, are afraid he's simply going to reject the outcome of the election and say fraud this and fraud that and refuse to step down. But voting by mail, we've been doing it for a long time. We know how to do it. It will overwhelm some localities, but we have time to get them ready.
Adam Goodman, Clyde Wilcox makes a very good point there. There is time to get all of this ready, but it's the president himself that keeps talking this up. He's even facing dissent from his own party. Key voices within his own party are saying to him, look, this is not the way we should be holding this election. What is going on there? What is the strategy for him? Is it scare tactics?
Well, I hope not. And I don't agree, frankly, with the president and some of the rhetoric he's used in terms of challenging the authenticity of our democracy and the system. I think what he's trying to do is to kind of prepare for battle. And the battle will happen, frankly, after the election itself, meaning if it's a close election. It will happen in state Supreme Courts. It will ultimately happen in the U.S. Supreme Court if there are a lot of issues that are raised about the processing, the counting of ballots. Get rid of the word fraud. Let's get beyond fraud. Let's just say election departments are trying their best to get it right, but they're just overwhelmed. And say there are close results, especially in the key swing states like Pennsylvania and North Carolina and my home state of Florida. If that happens, that the verdict is then going to go into court challenges in state Supreme Courts and ultimately to the Supreme Court of the United States, which means, and with ballots being counted still well after Election Day, we might not have a sense of a verdict for a number of weeks. And those are the weeks I worry about the most. I hope that Simon and Clyde both would agree that uncertainty in an election, post-election, is maybe the biggest threat of all that we face moving forward, if in fact that's how this election comes down.
And we have been here before. I mean, let's talk about the 2000 election, the recount, the hanging chads, the very confusing election that took place there. It did turn into a court battle. Clyde, I want to bring you in here. Is the American court system able to cope with another one of these very close contested results?
You know, right before the election, I was in Uganda, and the young legislators I was meeting with asked me what they should do if they had a close election. And the United States had an official position that we advised people, and that was to take all the time you need to count very carefully, to get both parties to agree to the results, right? And so we should have counted Florida, the entire state, right? We should have counted actually New Mexico, which was also very, very close, and maybe even Wisconsin. Wisconsin and New Mexico went for Gore, but, you know, Bush could have won in a recount. We didn't do that. We sued each other until we ran out of time. And so I do agree that, you know, the uncertainty might be a problem, but the way to solve an uncertainty is not to go to be suing each other constantly, is just to agree in advance, let's make sure we count all the votes, right? I mean, this is not that hard. If the leaders of both parties would say, we know this is going to be a problem, we don't want to have the greatest crisis, you know, in modern times, you know, we could pitch in the resources and we could figure this out.
I mean, but isn't that the nature, Clyde, of American politics? It is gladiatorial in nature. It is effectively two candidates swinging at each other. I think it was James Baker that said that in the 2000 recount that this was a street fight for the American election. That's how he described it. It's just the nature of American politics, right?
It doesn't have to be, right? I mean, so it was in 2000, and both candidates were making really arguments they should not have been making. So Al Gore was saying, I want to recount only these two counties. And George Bush was saying, I'm ahead right now, let's stop counting, right? Where we should have been saying, let's count Florida, let's count Wisconsin, let's count New Mexico.
Simon Rosenberg, is there a fault in the American electoral system? Is it just too complicated? It is one of the most complicated democracies on the planet. Maybe it's time to simplify.
It's a tough question. I mean, our election system is so decentralized in this country, and you know, listen. Let's hope that, I mean, as of today, this is not going to be a close election, and I think that that's actually a significant thing to keep in mind, because it creates a structure, an incentive structure for the president to do extraordinary things to kind of disrupt the current course of events, and whether that was his authoritarian intervention in Portland and potentially in Seattle over the last week, or his statement yesterday about potentially delaying the election. I mean, I think it's really important to recognize that one of the most important Republican legal advisors in the country, somebody who's been very close to this administration, worked with him very closely, called for the president's impeachment and removal over the statement he made yesterday about delaying the elections. And there was alarm throughout the entire Republican Party. Mitch McConnell and Leader McCarthy came out immediately and said, no, we're going to have our election on the 3rd. So I think yesterday the Republican Party writ large started raising concerns about the president's current state of mind and his intentions, and raising, you know, sort of warning him that he's got to cool it on his willingness to challenge the system. And I think what we've learned, just to summarize, is that our democracy was more fragile than we understood. That and Donald Trump's time in office has shown us that many things that we thought were sacrosanct were actually norms instead of rules, and that we've seen a dramatic weakening of the American democratic system. Let's hope this election isn't close. Let's hope there's a decisive outcome. I think there will be if things continue the way they are. And that, you know, the real challenge, I think, after the election is that will the president on election night, I think the fear that we all have on the Democratic side is that on election night, because of the number of absentee ballots, that on election night, the president declares victory and tries to delegitimize any counting that takes place afterwards, because Democrats are going to be using mail far more than Republicans will be because the president's basically
Simon, we are
told
running out
his-
of time, and I would like to bring in Adam Goodman here. There's 2 points I'd
Sure.
like to
Sorry.
address with you. Firstly, was it a wake-up call for the Republicans when this tweet actually came out? Did they become worried? And what's your response to what Simon had to say?
Yeah, it was a wake-up call, and I agree with Simon in terms of the criticism I think deserved in terms of some of the rhetoric that the president used. But what Simon is saying basically is that this election is over. He's way behind, and this, the Democrats' only worry now is that he's going to claim victory on election day. I don't agree with that at all. I think what we're looking at is potentially a very close election. Right now, the election is Donald Trump versus COVID. It's not even Donald Trump versus Joe Biden yet, and I think that can change a lot of things. But by the end of the day, the bottom line is that Americans have to feel confident in the final result. And the biggest job creator in the political industry today, just so everyone understands this, aren't campaign managers or media consultants or pollsters. It is lawyers. Both sides are lawyering up like crazy right now, anticipating that on November 8th, we might have just the beginning of the election in a way, as opposed to the end.
Clyde Wilcox, is lawyering up a smart thing, a healthy thing for the US election system, for America generally?
Well, it's a smart thing to do for both sides, because if one side is lawyering up, the other side obviously has to do it. But I sincerely hope that this doesn't come down to a series of lawsuits and trying to challenge ballots and so forth across a series of states. I think given Donald Trump's character, I really hope it's not a close election. Right? If with a different kind of president, if Romney was president, someone else, then a close election, fine. But with Donald Trump's character, I really worry that if it's a close election, he will do everything he can to stay in power.
We are running out of time, but I would like to ask all three of you this question. Actually, we do talk about close election a lot, but the president, and I'll begin with you, Adam Goodman, the president's well within his rights, if it is a close election, to do whatever he feels to do to make it fair and to get a victory for somebody.
Absolutely. And having gone through the Florida recount, I think I'm the only one in the program that actually was there on the ground going through this for 37 days, I think it was. You're trying your best in kind of an environment of uncertainty to try to get to a result that you think is appropriate. And frankly, in helping the Secretary of State, at that point, Catherine Harris, who got a lot of reputational hits, I think undeservedly, in that situation, we as a group had one mandate, and this will be hard maybe for partisans to understand. We wanted to get it right.
Clyde, this is just part and parcel of the American political system. The president's well within his rights. This is just, you just have to suck it up,
Well,
right?
he's well within his rights to challenge outcomes that are questionable, but he's not well within his rights to refuse to accept the outcome of an election. He's not well within his rights to try to delegitimize the outcome. He's not well within his rights to use authoritarian means to win. So sure, he can lawyer up and challenge. That's within his technical rights, but there are limits to what a president should do if he loves his country.
Simon, are you worried that if it is a very close election, or even if it's not a close election, but Donald Trump refuses to leave office, that you're going to be seen as going after the president of the United States of America, the Democratic Party, are going to be seen as sore losers?
No, I mean, listen, I think these are all very complicated and difficult questions. And I think that, Joe Biden has obviously conducted himself with enormous integrity and honor during this election process. It's something we have to continue to do. I think the country has made their judgment about Donald Trump. They know who he is. They don't want him to be in office any longer. They don't trust him. They know that he's capable of illegal and extraordinary acts. He's impeached and everything else. And so I don't think he has a strong leg to stand on. I don't think that the public is going to withstand kind of a frivolous set way to interfere with the normal democratic processes. And I think in some funny way, what may end up happening over the last few days is that I think he's going to drive turnout. We're going to have very, very high turnout in this election. I think there could be a huge, overwhelming rejection of the president. And I'm hopeful that, that we don't have to get to the point where there is within a few days of the election, the outcome is so clear that the country begins to move on to the next phase.
Just over 3 months to go, plenty of tweets to come and plenty of electioneering still to go. Thanks to all our guests, Adam Goodman, Clyde Wilcox and Simon Rosenberg. And thank you too for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can also join the conversation on Twitter. We are at AJ Inside Story. From me, Imran Khan, and the whole team here in Doha, bye for now.